Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Here's a classic tale from the world of investment banking where office politics and sharp skills collide in a high-stakes game. But before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button, smash the like if you enjoy the content, and ring that notification bell so you never miss a juicy story. Revenge against a female colleague who tried to take credit for my work. A few years back, I was working for a large investment banking company. I was originally in a back office role, but back office employees were frequently allowed to step into front office positions whenever there was a staff shortage. So I ended up in the front office for a month. After a few days, I was assigned a project where I, along with another female analyst, a first-year analyst, had to update a 70-page deck in just 2 days. The VP in charge was newly promoted from an associate role, so there wasn't an associate available for this project. For context, most back office staff who temporarily move to the front office don't care about getting credit for their work. They're typically only interested in enjoying the experience of being in a big city without any intention of working full-time in investment banking due to the long hours and intense work culture. Only once every few years does someone with genuine skills come through aiming for a full-time role. I was different from most. I'd been working in the field for almost 5 years and was better than many first-year analysts. The other female analyst knew my skills well, having worked with me before. She assumed she could manipulate me into doing all the work while she took credit for it. She would often come to me with requests like, "I have another urgent project that needs to be done. Can you please do one slide of mine?" Each time, she would give me more slides while she chatted with other analysts. Throughout the project, we would send work-in-progress versions of the deck to the VP for review. Whenever the VP had questions about the slides that were supposed to be done by the female analyst, he would come to me for help. I realized I needed to ensure I got credit for my work, so I would reply directly to the VP before she could come to my desk. When she did come, I would act innocent, explain the VP's questions, and mention that I had already responded because she wasn't at her desk when I looked over. After this happened 6 or 7 times, the VP realized I was the one doing all the work. The female analyst, being somewhat clueless, didn't catch on. Once the slides were completed, we needed to print them for the VP's review. The female analyst, in a bid to gain favor, told me in a sweet tone, "Oh, this is very petty work. You shouldn't do this. You did all the work anyway, so let me handle this and you can take a rest." I saw through her plan and let her do it. When she went to the VP with the printed deck expecting praise, the VP started shouting at her saying, "Why are you here alone without OP? You didn't do any of the work. Go and get OP since he did all of it." She returned to my desk within a minute, looking dismayed and asking me to come with her. The VP reviewed the deck, made several changes, and assigned most of the revisions to the female analyst. The VP thanked me for my work, especially since there was no associate on the project, and asked me to take on the role of associate, reviewing all future work from the female analyst. It was the best feeling I had during that entire month. The female analyst never figured out what happened or how the VP knew I did all the work. Our relationship remained good, and I made a strong impression on the VP, which helped me secure a full-time role in that office. Edit. I mentioned the analyst's gender because she was known for using her charm to get others to do her work, particularly from us back office staff. She had a reputation for taking credit for work she didn't do. And our second story. How I was fired from my pizza delivery job because I delivered pizzas. It's mid-August 1999, and I'd spent the summer delivering for a regional pizza place. Despite all the craziness that you hear pizza guys getting up to, getting robbed, customers paying in weed and other more lascivious things, it was actually pretty normal and I quite liked the gig. Until we got the new manager, that is. The new manager was introduced to us as someone who was very familiar with our town's pizza business, as he'd worked for most of the other pizza shops at some point in the prior 3 years. For some reason, the otherwise level-headed owner saw this as experience instead of can't hold down a job. The new manager didn't like me. I'm reasonably certain he didn't like me before he even met me. He was very upset that I didn't know how to take orders, make pizzas, or other in-store duties, despite the fact that I was never in the store to do these things. Regardless, his opinion of me didn't faze me much because I was always out on delivery, so I never saw him. Until the day I earned my firing, that is. I'm still not sure what planets aligned or what curses had been set on us, as there was no other explanation for what happened that evening. There were no major concerts in town, no sporting events, nothing. Apparently, the entire city just wanted our pizza that night. The phones were ringing off the hook constantly for hours. The stalwart team in the back were doing their best, but they simply couldn't keep up, so he moved the people answering the phones into the kitchen to help meet the demand. However, as you might expect, this meant nobody was answering the phones. And if there's nobody answering the phones, we don't get orders, and if we don't get orders, we can't make money, so he moved the delivery team onto the phones. Let me restate that with extra bold. All delivery drivers were now on the phones taking new orders. No pizzas were being delivered. We continued operating like this for 3 hours. Now, as you might expect, after the first 45 minutes, some of the callers were people wondering where their pizzas were. After 90 minutes, the percentage was up to half. After 2.5 hours, nearly every call was irate customers wondering when they were going to get their food, but they were never going to get their food because as long as the people were calling in, the drivers were kept at the phones. The manager didn't care that the majority of the calls weren't new orders, because what if they were? When hour 3 of this madness ticked over, something in my mind snapped. I'm not a phone guy, I'm a delivery guy. All these people I'm talking to just want a delivery guy to do his job. Would it be insubordination of a manager that desperately wanted to see me gone? Yes. But I wasn't thinking about that. I was only thinking of how incredibly solvable our current predicament was. So I, unannounced, abandoned the phone, grabbed as many orders off the shelf as I could, and loaded them into my car. I then went back in and got an equal quantity of 2-liter sodas because free soda's the only way our company knows how to say, "I'm sorry," and are automatically added to orders that take over an hour. I delivered the pizzas and apologies, came back and got another load. I kept delivering until there was nothing left to deliver. Epilogue. Technically, the insubordination is not why I was fired. Technically, I was fired for a no-call, no-show for a 15-minute shift the new manager snuck in during lunch rush on one of my off days. More technically, I was never fired. The new manager just removed all my hours from the schedule and assumed I'd notice. The "what are you doing here" when I arrived for my next shift was a little awkward. The owner, thankfully, was extremely apologetic and offered me my job back, but it was the week before I was headed back to college anyway, so it's not like I needed the hours. I politely declined and suggested he do something about the new manager. I don't think that manager lasted much longer. He was familiar with your town's pizza business? This guy doesn't seem like he's ever worked in any business before. And our last story. Harassed by neighbor, ignored by authorities. We live in Travis County, Texas, just outside city limits. It's a quiet area with minimal HOA involvement, mostly just building restrictions and no city council. The only real governing body is the county itself. Unfortunately, for years, we've been dealing with relentless harassment from a neighbor. Despite multiple requests for them to stop contacting us, countless police reports, and legal advice to document everything, the county sheriff's office has consistently brushed us off, labeling it a civil matter rather than a criminal one. About a year ago, we took things a step further and filed a civil lawsuit for harassment. We had hours of video footage as evidence documenting stalking, defamation, threats to kill our dogs, and even conspiring with someone to file a false report for claiming I was suicidal, all after receiving text messages urging me to kill myself. It was a long list of incidents that showed just how toxic and dangerous the situation had become. We eventually moved out of our home due to a particularly frightening incident that made us fear for our lives. This event was the final straw and prompted the lawsuit, especially since the sheriff's office failed to conduct a proper investigation. While we now live elsewhere, we still own our home and an adjacent vacant lot in the neighborhood. 2 months ago, things escalated even further. Our neighbor trespassed onto the vacant lot next to our former home, where he cut down the majority of the trees before setting them on fire. We only noticed what was happening when the fire reached above the tree line, prompting us to call the fire department. Thankfully, we have everything on video. When the sheriff arrived, our neighbor lied to the officer, claiming he was the caretaker of the property. At first, the officer seemed dismissive, assuming it was just a misunderstanding on our part. However, after the sheriff left the scene, our neighbor texted us saying we needed to discuss maintaining our land for the community. When the officer called us later, we showed him the text and the video footage. We also explained that there was a criminal trespass warning against this neighbor and that he was never the caretaker. The officer then told us they would recommend a warrant for arson, particularly since our neighbor had lied to the responding officer. 2 months have passed since that incident, and despite our repeated calls multiple times a week, the case remained unassigned. Finally, 2 days ago, we got a detective assigned to the case, but instead of taking action, the detective dismissed it as a neighbor squabble and said they would not recommend charges to the DA. To add insult to injury, the trees that were cut down were over 40 feet tall, including mature oak trees. We obtained an estimate that valued the cost to replace the trees at over $400,000, but we're still waiting on another quote. It's beyond frustrating that something so serious is being treated so lightly, especially given the history of harassment and threats. After months of feeling helpless and ignored, we finally got a break. We decided to take our case to court, representing ourselves since no local attorneys were willing to take on the case. Armed with our video evidence, documented history of harassment, and the absurdly low property damage estimates, we made our case before a judge. The judge was shocked by the extent of the harassment and the clear evidence of our neighbor's malicious intent. Not only did the court rule in our favor, but they also awarded us the full amount for the damages to the trees, as well as additional compensation for emotional distress and legal fees. The judge also ordered a permanent restraining order against our neighbor, barring him from any contact with us or entering our property ever again. Finally, the sheriff's office was also called out for their inaction, and an internal investigation was launched. We're hopeful that this will lead to better protection for us and others in the community facing similar issues. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.